Reddit fresh. Am I the idiot for telling my dad I can't stand his gold digger husband? I, 25F, told my dad I can't stand his gold digger husband, and I won't see their new baby. For background, when my twin brother and I were 18 and ready to head off to college, my parents announced they were getting divorced. The divorce was due to my dad being gay. It was a shock and a change, but my brother and I adore my dad, so we learned to cope and move on. No matter what, he would always be our dad, and we loved him unconditionally. When we were around 21, he met his husband, Brian. Things changed a lot when he came into the picture. He moved into our childhood home with our dad, got all new furniture, and changed every room. They started going on first-class trips to Europe, doing weekends in the Cape and on Fire Island, dinners at 5-star restaurants, all at Brian's request. My dad owns 2 successful businesses and can afford it. My brother and I couldn't help but feel like Brian was enjoying the perks more than my dad, though. The guy's life was one big social media story. He is very close in age to us, a bit older, and we truly felt he was enjoying my dad's money more than him. Every time we mentioned that Brian may be using him, Brian would find out and convince my dad we hate him because we are not over the divorce. He would tell my dad we needed counseling, and he would send us tolerance packets so we could, I'm not kidding, learn to deal with the truth. They ended up getting married, and my brother and I were furious he still couldn't see it. Brian was as rude as ever, and it was hard to visit, so we did it less often. Naturally, my dad was crushed. He didn't want to choose, but we couldn't watch him anymore. The other night, my dad begged my brother and I to go out to dinner with him and Brian. We did, and they excitedly told us they had found a surrogate and were going to have a baby, and they want us in the baby's life. To which I replied, "Are you going to leave this one behind too? Are you going to ignore it? Or is the third time the charm?" Brian freaked out and called us classless, ungrateful, pretty much everything he could. We left after he pulled out the waterworks. Brian's friends have gotten our numbers somehow and are calling us TA non-stop. So are we? Update. I woke up this morning to a text from someone claiming to be Brain's mom asking to talk. I reached out to my brother to ask, and he said he had already spoken to Brian and Dad both separately and together, and the 3 of them are mending things. My brother just wants all the craziness to stop because he loves Dad, and will love the baby too. He said it was up to me if I wanted to call, and they were all leaving the ball in my court. I was hesitant to call this lady, but I work from home today, so if things went south I could say my piece, hang up and move on. I called her and she was actually really nice. She wasn't rude and didn't yell. She said Brian had lost his dad to cancer young, which I knew, and he has trouble connecting with people emotionally sometimes, but he has a kind heart and wants to be close to me and my brother. When I expressed my concerns about the age difference and money, she said when Brian met my dad, she also had her reservations due to him being newly out and older. She wondered if her son was just a hookup for him, and if my dad was just playing around because he was newly out. She was concerned because my dad is close to her age too. Brain was so in love, she said she couldn't stop the inevitable, so she looked past it and supported them, and she is glad to see the life they built. In total, we spent about an hour on the phone, which is more than I talked to my own mom in 2 months. She was extremely sweet. She invited me for coffee with her and Brian, and I said I'd let her know. I called my dad and he said he and Brian were ready when I am, so I'm going to meet them later tonight. Will I be best friends with Brian right away? Probably not. I can try to be civil for my dad, though. It would be nice to have my dad back and see him happy. Update. One more update here. I did go over to hear them out the other night. It was tense. Brian was standoffish, and I did question why he gave my number out. His reply was that he had no other option, and was hoping one of his friends could help us understand where he was coming from since he couldn't. He quoted, "Had no idea they would get rude and would talk to them. I told him I had to block like 5 people, and although his mom was nice, I don't want him to give our numbers out to anyone else, or I'll be changing my number and not giving it to them," which got my dad upset, understandably. We all agreed to make more of an effort to stay civil. Do not jump at each other as well. The baby is coming in about 7 months, and I would like to see it. It is super clear Brian and I are not friends, nor will be anytime soon. I do think he is a baby trapping my dad. I will take my brother's lead and stop saying things, though. For all those saying I'm not over the divorce or my dad coming out, that's not true. I don't care. He is still the same person. He still loves us and that won't change. For all those saying I'm pissed because of inheritance, that's nuts. FYI, we have jobs, make good money, and we never relied on my parents for a dime since we started working. We are fortunate to live on our own and be okay with roommates, but we don't need their money. It was always about my dad being used and our fear of him getting hurt. I do not think they have a prenup, but I have never asked. You're the idiot. For how you expressed your thoughts. There was no need for that. Your dad didn't abandon you. Your reaction here only helps prove Brian correct to your dad, no matter how sus AF his motives are. You're the idiot. Brian sounds like a high-maintenance pill for sure, and I can't say I'd be super fond of him either, but your resentment and obsession about what your dad does with his money are very misplaced. You are an adult, but you are acting like a bratty teenager. You can be in your dad's life without being all up in his business, and what you said to their happy news they chose to share with you was unforgivably hurtful. Brian may be wrong about some things, but he might be right about you needing some counseling. Please seek it before shoving your whole leg in your mouth again. Now for the next story. Am I the idiot for asking my ex if our son, 11, could bring his stepbrother, also 11, on their father-son camping trip? My ex and I got a divorce when our son was 6. When he was 8, I started dating my current husband. On the day my son met his stepbrother, they stood in front of each other, sized each other up the way little boys do, and were silent for a moment. Then my son asked, "Do you want to play Smash Bros?" And his stepbrother said yes, and then ran upstairs. It was fraternal love at first sight. They've been attached at the hip ever since. My stepson's mother passed away a few years ago, and my husband was actually reluctant to introduce me and my son to his 2 kids, because he thought it was too soon. It turns out that where some kids get a pet after a parent dies, my stepson and stepdaughter got a brother. The first year we were all together, my stepson asked if my son could come along when they visited their mother at the cemetery on her birthday, and he spent the whole car ride over telling my son all about her, and it seemed therapeutic for him. Later that night I checked in and saw that my son had climbed up to the top bunk, and they had fallen asleep curled up together. Before she entered her current 7 going on 17 phase, my stepdaughter used to crawl into my son's lap as often as she did my stepson and ask them to read to her. Since the divorce, my ex-husband has been unreliable at best. He cancels on my son regularly, making some excuse about work or what have you. The twice-monthly weekend together have trailed off to the OR 4 times a year. Every time I have to tell my son his father canceled, my stepson goes to his father and asks if the 3 of them can do something together. One of the few things my ex-husband likes enough to always follow through with is camping. He's planning on taking my son to the Poconos in a few weeks, the weekend after Father's Day weekend. My son lives camping as well, and he's the one who convinced my stepson to join Boy Scouts next fall. The thing is, this year he wants to bring his stepbrother along. I told my ex-husband this and he got upset, saying that it's their time together and he doesn't want someone else's kid along with them. He says that it's supposed to be the 2 of them bonding. I told him he's had plenty of chances to bond that he blew off for one reason or another, and that he should consider himself lucky that he has such a compassionate and sensitive son, and that our son still wants anything to do with him. He hung up on a huff. His mother called yesterday to complain that I was expecting my ex to just sit there while my son and stepson went off on their own and ignored my ex completely, and said that I need to look at it from his perspective since he only gets to see our son a few times a year. For obvious reasons, this annoyed me to the point where I hung up. My husband says that he gets it and thinks I should let it just be the 2 of them. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. For asking, though I agree with your husband that you should let just the 2 of them go. You asked, he said no. Instead of making it a big deal, I'd just tell your son Dad wants it to be just the 2 of you, and let him make a decision for himself when he's old enough how much he prioritizes a dad who won't even let his brother who he loves come along once. Also, congrats on this beautiful blended family situation. Everything apart from your ex-husband warmed the absolute frick out of my heart. Not the idiot. You only ask this of your ex because your son wants his stepbro to go. Your ex is insecure with his father-son relationship and it shows, but that's his own fault like you stated. The least he could do is make this trip the most enjoyable for his son. X's feelings should be hurt by a kid leaving him out cause WTF does he think his son feels every time his father cancels. Now for the next story. Am I the idiot for not paying for my daughter to go on vacation with us because she didn't do the small chores that I asked? My husband and I have 5 kids. 4 girls, 20, 17, 12, 5, and 1 boy, 10. This post is mostly about my oldest daughter. My oldest was in school full-time, but this semester she went from 14 credits to 6 because 2 of her classes, math and science, were too hard. She's currently taking 2 dance classes, which are both online and take approximately an hour per week combined. I'm taking one of them with her so I see how she does them. 1 hour is being generous. She also works at the post office 12 hours per week, but besides that she doesn't have any commitments. We haven't been on a family vacation in years, so this year we're going all out. We're spending 2 weeks at an all-inclusive resort in Mexico. The older 2 were going to get their own room. We were going to fly business there and plenty of excursions. We've been having a hard time with my oldest, really over the past couple years, but especially over the past week. She's supposed to walk the dog every day, a 10-15-minute walk, but she does it maybe once a week if we're lucky. I'll ask her if she could pick up groceries on her way back from hanging out with her friends and be home by a certain time so I could make dinner and she'll show up 3 hours later than when she said she would, or I'll ask her to take some meat out of the freezer and she'll forget. I send her multiple reminders. So far this week, on Monday, I asked her to walk the dog and pick up some medicine for my 12-year-old at the shopping center that she was already going to. She did neither. On Tuesday, I asked her to walk the dog and take the turkey out of the freezer for dinner. She did neither, and she left the gas stove on for 6 hours. Wednesday, I asked her to take the trash out, walk the dog, and pick the younger 3 up from school. She didn't do any of those things. I ended up having to ask my 75-year-old neighbor to pick the kids up. By the way, this girl doesn't pay for poop. We pay for her school, her car insurance, maintenance, phone bill, etc., and she still can't be bothered to help out the family. Yesterday, after I got home from work and picked the kids up from the neighbor's house, I told my oldest that we will not be paying for her to go on this vacation, and if she keeps this up, she'll have to get out and try living in the real world. She's furious, and is saying it's hard for her to do these things because of her ADHD, and my husband is saying I'm being too hard on her. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. She's old enough to be responsible for her actions and inactions, and could still set reminders, write notes, and make to-do lists. But I'm curious how long she's been diagnosed with ADHD and if she's receiving treatment. Do you think it's possible she could be showing you attitude and need more help with her condition? Not the idiot. It sounds like your daughter has been given constant reminders to get things done, but still isn't doing them anyways. I do think it may have been more effective to warn her that if this were to continue, you wouldn't pay for the vacation instead of immediately jumping to this consequence. That way, she would have a heads up for this behavior and have more time to get it in check. Now, for the next story. Am I the idiot for not backing up my husband when he ordered our adult daughter go to her room? My husband and I have a 22-year-old daughter, Sienna, that lives with us while she attends college. Sienna and I have always been very close. We're a lot alike, share similar interests, etc. We're also both very stubborn. I've always been okay with her voicing her opinions, challenging me, etc. I don't want her to blindly respect me. We occasionally have a tiny tiff or whatever, but we always make up rather quickly. My husband grew up in a very different household. He never would have questioned his mother even as an adult. They never had any arguments and rather just kept everything bottled in. It's been very hard for him to accept that it's healthy for Sienna to voice her opinions and to not blindly accept our word. Before anyone asks, he has refused therapy, and I don't see him budging on the issue. My husband often gets irritated when Sienna and I have a disagreement, telling us both to stop. He doesn't want to hear it, etc. I've told him before this is healthy communication. Sienna doesn't speak to him that way out of respect, knowing he doesn't want to have that kind of dynamic. So it shouldn't matter if she does it with me. Again, we've had several discussions with him about respecting our relationship and how it works. Also keep in mind, Sienna and I are not arguing heavily every day. We may just have a minor disagreement, or we'll roll our eyes at one another, joke around, etc. a few times a week. Last night, we sat down for dinner. Sienna was in a bit of a mood as she had a bad day at school. She had already told me she didn't want to talk about it, so I was respecting her. She ended up getting a little snappy when I asked her if she wanted to do something. I just told her there were better ways of answering that, and she rolled her eyes. I was ready to let it go when my husband jumped in and told Sienna to go to her room for being disrespectful. She said she's an adult and he said she lives rent-free in his house. She needs to listen. I told him that I didn't mind, and he said that he didn't want to hear this attitude. I asked him to leave the table with me and we went to the other room. I once again pointed out that I didn't mind Sienna being a little short with me, as I get why. I also said I know she and I will discuss it later and she'll apologize. We all have bad days. He said he's tired of hearing us squabble and she talks to me like this. I said I'm tired of him trying to control my relationship with her. By his own admission, Sienna won't talk to him that way, so why does it matter? I said Sienna wasn't going to her room unless she wanted to. End of discussion. In the end, my husband went up to our room. He hasn't spoken to me since and things are a little tense. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your daughter is a 22-year-old adult. The days of being sent to her room are long over. If your husband thinks sending a 22-year-old to her room is acceptable, then he should reevaluate whether he wants her to live there rent-free or at all. Because if she does live there, he needs to accept that she will be treated as an adult and not a child. You're the idiot. Sounds like you've made excuses for your daughter being a certain way, and now she's an adult, treats you however she feels. I feel bad for your husband, and it sounds as if he has tried to parent her and stop that behavior and you didn't let him. I'd be pissed if my kids talked to their mother a certain way in front of me too.